thank you all for making this conference happen. It's, as you know, it's a wonderful thing. My presentation is not really about Buddhism in the West. It's about Vajrayana Buddhism seen through a Western lens, but then applied here in Bhutan. So it has been my great privilege to work as a clinical psychologist with mental health patients here in Thimphu at the National Referral Hospital for a total of 9 months from 2017 to 2019. I found through doing this work that bridges between Buddhist wisdom and modern psychology can support the development of mental health care in Bhutan in several ways. In this presentation, I'll describe 2 ways of bridging that I identified and used in my work here. First, understanding both Buddhist and modern psychological perspectives on the role of context in mental health can help to strengthen Bhutan's commitment to creating socioeconomic conditions that support mental health, as well as the work of psychotherapists providing mental health treatment for Bhutanese clients. A second way of bridging Buddhist wisdom and modern psychology is to make therapeutic use of conceptual links between Western concepts of well-being and specific Buddhist teachings. This can empower psychotherapy clients to apply their own cultural wisdom to resolve problems rather than relying solely on Western concepts and methods for help with common mental disorders such as anxiety, depression, and response to trauma. I'll present case examples to illustrate how these uses of ancient wisdom can support Bhutan's goals of preserving traditional culture, improving the psychological well-being of its citizens, and integrating Buddhism into solutions for contemporary social issues. Yes, to my knowledge, this is the first systematic attempt to integrate Buddhist wisdom with psychotherapy for Bhutanese clients. And the parts of this presentation are based on a published article, and that's the reference there. Okay, next slide. Okay, the World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to the community. Next. Although Buddhism does not specifically define mental health or illness, it offers a view of genuine, enduring happiness as a state of well-being that involves mental balance, freedom from delusion, and compassion to help others achieve this state as well. Next. Okay, the teachings of impermanence, dependent arising, emptiness, and karma define the role of context in the Buddhist worldview. Nagarjuna stated that everything is embedded in contexts that are subject to change, and nothing has permanent essence of its own. We are therefore free to cultivate conditions in our own lives that will support the development of wisdom, compassion, and ethical behavior in ourselves and others. According to the law of karma, people can make intentional choices that influence their lives, relationships, and paths to enlightenment. Nagarjuna asserted that the actions of a benevolent ruler guided by wisdom and compassion are conducive to well-being for both the ruler and his subjects. This approach to leadership was first enacted here in Bhutan by the Gyalpo in the 17th century. It's enshrined in the Royal Constitution of Bhutan and is the basis for the policy of gross national happiness. The relationship between the social cultural context and the individual in this view is one of reciprocal responsibility. A government can only endeavor to provide the causes and conditions in which individuals can act. We are all responsible for creating, by our actions, conditions in which all beings can thrive. Okay. Tsongkhapa asserted that what we perceive as real is actually decided by convention. Things can be valid within particular contexts, although not in other contexts. This view resonates with the Western relativist view that there is no single formulation of reality that is inherently correct. Understanding this view is essential for psychotherapists working in situations where the therapist and client have different cultural assumptions. Okay. Research by modern psychologists has refuted the earlier assumptions that individuals are entirely separate from their contexts in favor of biopsychosocial or ecological theories that recognize the embeddedness of human beings in context. Cultural, economic, social, and political influences, as well as biological and psychological factors, all play a role in the development of mental disorders. Psychological research has produced a wealth of scientific evidence about specific contextual contributors to suffering and about ways of alleviating many types of psychological suffering. A report published by the World Health Organization in June this year and echoed in the recent Paro Declaration here in Bhutan recognizes the role of context in mental health and calls for major worldwide changes in the institutions and mechanisms by which mental health care is valued and supported. The contexts in which people are embedded are shaped at the broadest level by culture. Cultures are systems of meaning that guide the actions of their members. They are fluid and ever-changing, and they're expressed in social institutions and practices, and in interpersonal settings such as families, communities, and workplaces. Culture is located externally in the social environment and also carried within each person in the form of knowledge, values, and skills that we use for navigating daily life. Culturally patterned daily activities shape the brain's neural pathways and functions. Skills, values, and knowledge become embodied and embrained in this way and shape our responses to the situations that arise in daily life. In this way, culture shapes the expression and experience of mental illness and the ways that people cope with it. For these reasons, efforts to promote well-being and resilience must be informed by local cultural values, beliefs, and ways of life. The global mental health movement and the World Health Organization advocate for the development of brief mental health treatments based on both scientific evidence and local cultural healing traditions. Psychotherapy is based on the idea, next slide please. Psychotherapy is based on the idea that healing for mental disorders takes place in the context of interpersonal interaction with an empathic and skilled psychotherapist. The process of doing psychotherapy can be described as co-creating the conditions for internal change while recognizing the influence of external causes and conditions. Next, please. There are several ways in which a psychotherapist trained in modern psychotherapy and working in Bhutan, and that includes Bhutanese therapists who are trained in Western psychotherapy, can bring her understanding of context from both Buddhist and modern psychological perspectives to her work. First, she can become familiar with the full range of causes and conditions that are contributing to the client's suffering. Understanding that all behavior is context-dependent, the therapist can choose interventions that are tailored to each client and help clients develop skillful means for responding to particular situations. She can be aware that helping one person at a time can affect a family, a community, even a society. Compassionate people thrive in a compassionate society. And knowing that no single worldview is inherently correct, a therapist can bridge her Western knowledge with the client's cultural wisdom to facilitate culturally meaningful solutions. And this brings us to another way of bridging Buddhism and modern psychology. I have identified 6 principles of mental health or principles of therapeutic change that are common among Western diagnostic categories and models of therapy and are compatible with gross national happiness definitions of health and psychological well-being. They are listed on the left there along with Buddhist concepts that I see as conceptually linked with them. The table does not imply equivalence. It rather highlights conceptual links that offer opportunities for building culturally meaningful bridges. The Western principles, as you can see, a sense of agency, the ability to regulate one's emotions, to avoid acting harmfully out of anger or other disruptive emotions, and that is addressed in the Buddhist concepts of equanimity and non-attachment. flexibility, non-avoidance of experience, cultivating, nurturing healthy relationships, and problem solving. While listening to the client's narrative of concerns, thoughts, next slide, and feelings, the therapist identifies the need to address a specific therapeutic principle, bridges mentally to one or more of the linked Buddhist concepts, and responds to the client in terms of a cultural concept that may be more meaningful and more motivating to the client. She then offers interventions using techniques that are based on scientific evidence and congruent with Buddhist beliefs. There are evidence-based interventions for addressing each of these things, and also Buddhist literature, including the 7-point mind training and Shantideva's way of the Bodhisattva, and many others, also offer a wealth of ideas and skills that therapists and clients can use. Case example, a 23-year-old woman was brought to therapy by her mother because the mother wanted the daughter to end an abusive relationship that she had been in for several years. The mother said that she herself had stayed in an abusive marriage for 20 years because it was her karma to do so. Focusing on the therapeutic principle of agency, I asked the daughter if she thought it was her karma to stay in her relationship, or whether Buddhists believe they can shape their karma through intentional action. She thought for a moment, and she said that she believed she could choose actions that would affect her future. I asked her to think about what kind of future she wanted and what actions she could take that would lead to it. She was able to articulate a healthy vision of her future. We had several more sessions, and within a few sessions she had ended the abusive relationship and made concrete plans to work abroad. Second case example. A 42-year-old woman had been diagnosed with severe panic attacks that caused her to lose consciousness. Hoping to identify a trigger for the attacks, I asked what she had been doing just before her last attack. She said that she had been chatting with family and friends about her 96-year-old grandfather who was ill. She was very worried about him. I reminded her of the inevitability of death and paraphrased Shantideva. If the situation can be fixed, why worry? If it can't be fixed, why worry? She looked at me with intensity and she said emphatically, it's his karma. He has to take care of his karma, and I have to take care of mine. Whatever it is, she said. She was able to let go of her feeling of responsibility for her grandfather's karma. I pointed out that worry only brings suffering and keeps us from being compassionate to ourselves and others. I taught her an exercise to help her relax her muscles and told her a Buddhist story about letting go. At the end of the session, she looked relaxed and she said that she was 100% sure that this treatment was going to work. Third case example illustrates reference to the concept of interdependent arising. The client was a highly educated woman in her 30s who had been on a leave of absence from her job while she was in therapy to resolve a traumatic experience. As we were coming to the end of her therapy, she said she wanted to return to her job in another town, but her parents in Thimphu were opposed. She wanted to insist on going, but didn't want to be disrespectful. I agreed that it was important to maintain a good relationship with her parents and suggested she consider that according to the teaching of dependent arising, there are many causes and conditions that must come together to create change. Perhaps she could simply state her preference and reasoning respectfully and allow her parents to consider it and come to their own conclusions before she made her decision. At the end of the next session, she said that she had done what I suggested. Her parents had agreed that she could return to her home and work. During my final session with this client, I asked whether my references to Buddhist teachings in therapy had been helpful, and she said, very helpful. She said, Bhutanese know the values and the theoretical part of Buddhism, but the implementation is not there. So, in conclusion, Vajrayana teachings, Bhutan's philosophy and history of governance, and modern psychology all support the World Health Organization's commitment to shaping physical, social, and economic context to promote mental health. Understanding Buddhist perspectives on context and well-being can help psychotherapists tailor their work to Bhutanese clients. and bridging modern psychology and Buddhist wisdom in psychotherapy may strengthen therapeutic change, encourage Bhutanese to use mental health services as needed, and enhance their sense of cultural pride. Next. I hope that my work will open a window through which more bridges can be seen, and I hope that my colleagues and students here in Bhutan will test this work and develop it. Next slide, please. Here are some of my colleagues and students here in Bhutan in spring of 2018. Developing and using these and other bridges between Buddhism and modern psychology can support the goals of this conference, preserving traditions, clarifying their meaning, and facilitating their reactualization by new generations.